Hi there, I'm Tim Autrey, and welcome to Principle-Based Performance Improvement, where we combine timeless wisdom with modern science and practical tools to help you move yourself and your organization toward better, safer, and more productive outcomes.
In this episode, we're going to talk about the physiology of the brain, the actual physical makeup, and we're going to keep it relatively simple. I mean, you could go to school for many, many years to fully understand the brain, and I don't think anybody fully understands the human mind, but we're going to keep this very simple. So we're going to say, for our purposes, the human brain consists of three parts, three primary components. The first one of which is the most involved part of the brain, which is referred to as the neocortex. Now, that's the part that's around the top and in the frontal lobes of your brain. And this is where our cognitive thinking, our problem solving, our high-level thinking, logic, all that stuff takes place. The neocortex is the slowest part of our brain, and it also hogs the most energy. So when you are involved in high-level thinking, you're burning lots of glucose. In the middle, we have what's called the limbic brain, and this is where all your emotions are stored, your memories, basically your subconscious mind, all that stuff's hanging out predominantly in your limbic brain, and because of that, we can kind of think of it that in the grandest scheme of things, this part of your brain, or your subconscious mind, really is the biggest controller of your life, of how you do what you do the way you do it. And then the most primitive part of our brain, which is about the size of a walnut and hangs out right at the top of our spinal column, is scientifically referred to as the amygdala. Now, the amygdala, from a perspective of being an influencer or being influenced, is hugely important, and it's really critical that we understand this. So we're going to talk a lot here about the amygdala. And you notice we refer to the amygdala as the gatekeeper. And the reason for that is because everything coming in from the outside world, before it's even allowed to the rest of the brain, has to pass through the amygdala. The amygdala works at lightning speed, and it decides whether or not it's going to pass information on to the rest of the brain, which is why we call it the gatekeeper. Now, we have another name for the amygdala, which I think is a little more fun. We call it the lizard brain because it's basically the same level of brain that a lizard has or that reptiles have. Very, very fundamental, very, very rudimentary, has a couple of primary functions, and that's it. So, what do you think the primary function is of the lizard brain? Well, you probably already know this. It's survival. You know, a few years ago, we never even heard about this stuff, but we're learning more and more collectively. And as an influencer, it's really important that you understand the functioning of this part of the brain. So the lizard brain's primary function is survival. So any information coming in from the outside world, it asks a question. And the first question it asks is this a threat? Because its primary function is your survival, if it's a threat, it's going to immediately prompt you to do one of two things. Either fight or flight. We've all heard this before. Fight or flight. Your body is likely, if you perceive a threat, your body is likely to get flooded with adrenaline, and everything goes into action to do one of those two things. Now, in our modern world, what do fight and flight look like? If you're talking about a teenager at home, or if you're talking about somebody at work, it usually doesn't get to fisticuffs. So what fight normally would look like in today's modern world, and let's just keep this conversation focused to the workplace, somebody who's particularly argumentative or contrary or disruptive or whatever. Let's say you're having a meeting or you're giving a class or whatever it happens to be, and somebody's just blah, 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 blah. Chances are pretty good that their amygdala has kicked in and they've gone down this pathway. So what's the other one here? Flight. What does that look like in, again, the work context? Well, let's say you're having a meeting and somebody feels threatened by what you're saying, and yet to be professional, they're sitting there and they're nodding, they might even be smiling, but they have completely checked out. They have gone away. Now, that's the first question that the lizard brain asks, and there are a series of other questions. A lot of us are familiar with this one. we're not so familiar with the other questions that this part of the brain asks. And remember, everything has to go through this process before it's ever even allowed to the rest of the brain. So let's take a look at this. So if the answer to this is no, it's not perceived as a threat. And by the way, you have some fill in the blanks here on page 40. If it's not perceived as a threat, then the next question that the lizard brain asks is this complex? Now, why would it ask that? Well, remember, this is the most primitive part of the brain. It's been around pretty much since the beginning of the evolution of man. The original folks that were on the planet, and you think about what life conditions were like back then, they were pretty harsh. Not only were there lots of danger around, there was something that was in short supply during many seasons of the year anyway. What was that? Food. Well, relative to this, the human brain, if you think about it as an organ, it's about 2 to 5% of the body's mass. It consumes about 25% of the body's energy. And this part of your brain, as we already talked about, the neocortex, it's an energy hog. It sucks energy like crazy. So, because the lizard brain is here for your survival, if something appears to be complex, and again, it doesn't necessarily have the capacity to logically work its way through, if it perceives something to be complex, it doesn't even allow it to the rest of the brain. What happens here is it filters it out. It just meters it out. And it does that to conserve energy. Now, I mentioned that the lizard brain asks a few other questions. In your handout, the picture that you're seeing is the leadership handout. I just want to make you aware that there's a couple more questions before the lizard brain finishes its deal here. So we've already gone through this part. Is it a threat? Yes. Fight, flight? No. Okay. Is it complex? Yes. Filters out about up to 90% of anything that's coming in. So what happens if the answer to this, is it complex, is no? Well, the lizard brain asks the next question. Is this unique? Or is it the same thing I've heard over and over and over and over? We've seen that response, I'm sure, many of us with our teenagers at home when you're ranting on about something that you've ranted on about the same thing and said the same thing over and over and over. I mean, you could just watch the whole composure change. And generally, in that little example, the kids just check out and you're just wasting your breath. So, is it unique? If the answer to that is no, well, it's going to filter out pretty much all or up to 90% of what's coming in. If it is unique, there's one more question that the lizard brain asks. Now remember, its purpose is survival, and this is where we're starting to bridge the gap between survival and desire, okay? So it asks, is this novel? Is this interesting? Is this entertaining? Is it something that is, somehow tickling my thoughts a little bit? Something that I want to pursue further? If the answer to that is no, you're just going to be disregarded. If the answer to that is yes, then you have the opportunity to influence. So, going through this more complex diagram here, let's say you want to influence someone to do something. You need to make it non-threatening, simple. You should come at it from a way that they haven't heard it before, and to the best of your ability, make it intriguing, entertaining, and fun. In our world, and if you are a facilitator or a trainer, any training you want to do, you need to think about this. Now, let's talk about this from the perspective of because a lot of folks that are likely on the other side of this camera here, you're involved in safety, and perhaps you do safety training. Now, what's the classic old recipe in an organization? So you're watching the data, and you're watching the trends, and you happen to notice that, 3 or 4 times in the past several months, people have cut their hands. So what we decide to do is we decide to do more hand safety training. And the thing is, it's the same training that we've already done 7 times over the past few years. So you bring people into the room, and it's not threatening, although they really don't want to be there. It's not threatening, and even because they've heard it, let's say maybe it's not threatening, and you've done a nice job of making it simple, step by step. Okay, so then you're all the way down through here, and then it gets down to this unique question, and it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm having to sit through this again. You are absolutely wasting your time. So if you want to influence someone, one-on-one or in a meeting or a classroom situation, for goodness sakes, you need to make it non-threatening, as simple as possible. Come at it uniquely. So if it's an issue that's been talked about before, figure out how to talk about it differently or come at it from a different angle. And for goodness sakes, to the best of your ability, make it fun and entertaining. And then you will have the opportunity to influence, okay? So that's what's going on in the lizard brain. Once we get down here, the lizard brain says, okay, I'm going to pass this on to the rest of the brain, and that's where it begins to interface with the other two parts of your brain, the limbic brain and the neocortex.
If you're finding these insights helpful, please share them with your friends and colleagues. Help your search engine find more content like this for you by hitting the like button before you leave. And if these PPI messages resonate with you, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the next one. Until next time, my friend, be safe, stay humble, and make a difference.